In every journey of growth, there's a moment before the moment. A moment when everything is still, when the world is quiet, and all you have is a spark inside you, waiting to awaken. It's a spark you may not always see, a spark others may overlook, but it never disappears. It grows in silence, gathers strength in the shadows, and prepares you for something greater. And then, the first crack appears. A crack in old habits, a crack in old beliefs, a crack in the story you were told about your limits. That crack widens, your perspective shifts, your vision sharpens, and suddenly, there's no going back. Because once you see your potential, you cannot deny it. The spark becomes a surge, the surge becomes a wave, and the wave becomes a burst of pure possibility, breaking through every layer of doubt, every barrier, every shadow that once held you down. In that burst, something new emerges, a new identity, a new posture, a new sense of purpose. You stand taller, clearer, stronger. And from that moment on, you don't walk into the future the same way. You step forward with confidence, with intention, with the power to transform not just your work, but your life. This is your awakening. This is where your transformation begins. Every transformation reaches a point where new frameworks aren't enough, where the pieces leaders have collected across the journey must come together into something unified, powerful, and alive. Today, we enter that point. Execution, capability, culture. These aren't independent systems. They are three interdependent forces that rise or collapse together. And performance intelligence, the fourth dimension, is what connects them, stabilizes them, and reveals the truth of how an organization is really functioning beneath the surface. This episode brings all of it into one integrated engine, a model designed not just to explain change, but to run it, diagnose it, and sustain it. What you're about to see is the complete architecture, the operating system behind every successful transformation that lasts. This is the integrated change engine, the moment where everything you've learned becomes one. Up until now, each episode has given you a powerful piece of the transformation puzzle. Execution, the actions. Capability, the support system. Culture, the invisible engine. Performance intelligence, the early warning radar. But none of these pieces can deliver lasting change on their own. This episode matters because it's the moment everything merges into a single, integrated system, a living engine that shows leaders how change truly works. It's where we stop looking at transformation as a collection of frameworks and start seeing it as one interconnected flow. You'll understand how actions trigger capability demands, how capability shapes culture, how culture reinforces or resists the work, and how performance intelligence ties all of it together in real time. This episode gives leaders something they rarely have, a complete blueprint for diagnosing, guiding, and sustaining change across an entire organization. When you understand the integrated change engine, you gain the ability to not just launch transformation, but to keep it stable, adaptive, and alive. That's why this episode matters. It's the moment change stops being theoretical and becomes operational. Everything we've built so far leads here. Execution, capability, and culture are not three ideas. They're one engine. And when you reconnect them, you understand something most organizations never see. Execution is what teams do every day, the actions, the deliverables, the outcomes. But execution doesn't live in isolation. It is powered or limited by capability. Capability is the system underneath the work, the structure, the tools, the clarity, the processes, the support. If capability is weak, even the most talented team will slow down. If capability is strong, execution becomes effortless. But neither execution nor capability can survive long without culture. Culture is the layer that decides whether the right behavior sticks. You can train people, structure the work, and set clear expectations. But if the cultural norms do not reinforce those behaviors, they fade. Culture determines whether new habits survive the week or become the new standard. Most organizations treat these three like separate topics: three departments, three priorities, three conversations. But in reality, they operate in a single loop. Execution creates the experiences people feel. Those experiences shape the culture. The culture reinforces or undermines the capabilities leaders are trying to build. If any one of the three is disconnected, the entire engine stalls. Execution without capability burns people out. Capability without culture collapses on impact. Culture without execution becomes symbolism with no substance. When all three are aligned, when behavior, systems, and norms pull in the same direction, change stops feeling like a series of initiatives and starts feeling like momentum. That's the integrated change engine. Every part connected, every part reinforcing the others. And once leaders see the system as a whole, everything else becomes clearer, faster. Up until now, our model has shown three major engines of transformation: execution, capability, and culture. But even with all three working, an organization can still fail if it can't sense what's happening in real time. And that's why the performance intelligence layer exists. PI is the active sensing layer. It constantly reads the organization the same way a pilot reads instrumentation mid-flight, not after the turbulence, but during it. Where execution tells us what is happening, and capability tells us what's possible, and culture shapes how people behave, PI reveals what's changing right now. It detects drift before leaders can see it. It picks up friction while it's still small. It surfaces strain before it becomes burnout, and it exposes misalignment before it becomes resistance. Without the PI layer, the change engine is blind. With it, the model becomes alive, adaptive, responsive, and self-correcting. PI turns data into behavior. It turns warning signs into decisions. And most importantly, it turns a static model into a living system that can steer itself through uncertainty. Everything in this series has been building toward what you're looking at now. This is the integrated change engine, the complete system behind successful transformation. At its core, we have the three forces leaders already influence every day: execution, the steps, sequencing, and leadership actions that define how change moves; capability, the organizational systems, resources, and capacity that either support the change or suffocate it; culture, the behaviors, norms, and shared beliefs that ultimately determine whether change becomes the way we do things. These three dimensions are tightly interconnected. If one is weak, the others struggle. If one collapses, the entire effort stalls. But wrapped around all three is the fourth dimension: performance intelligence. This is your early detection layer, the real-time diagnostic system that tells you not how things looked last quarter, but where the change is drifting today. It's the layer that prevents collapse and accelerates momentum. When these four dimensions operate together, leaders finally have what we've always needed: a complete engine, one that can be diagnosed, strengthened, and tuned. This is the first reveal of the full system. From here on, we're not talking about individual concepts, we're talking about how the entire engine works. Stress is where every transformation is tested and where most fail. But the integrated change engine was designed for this exact moment. When pressure hits an organization, stress doesn't hit one dimension at a time. It hits all three at once. 1. Execution under stress. Under pressure, execution reveals its truth. Teams either speed up cleanly because the system is aligned, or start bypassing processes, escalating delays, and hiding problems. Stress exposes whether execution is fueled by clarity or held together by heroics. 2. Capability under stress. Capability is the dimension that cracks first. The moment strain increases, you see rising friction, growing backlogs, declining responsiveness, and people compensating instead of performing. High-performing teams don't collapse from lack of effort. They collapse because the system cannot carry the load. 3. Culture under stress. Culture shows its real identity in these moments. Do people speak up or go silent? Do leaders stay consistent or tighten control? Do teams collaborate or protect turf? Do hidden rules override the official values? Stress exposes the operating rules beneath the surface. 4. Performance intelligence under stress. This is where the fourth dimension becomes the force multiplier. PI detects micro delays the moment they appear, reveals the exact point where capability is cracking, shows friction clusters forming, and alerts leaders before culture shifts into protection mode. Stress no longer collapses the transformation, it becomes data, and that data becomes guidance. The integrated engine's real advantage. Most systems break silently. The integrated engine sends signals loudly, early, and with context. Stress becomes the moment the model switches on, the moment leaders get the clearest visibility, and the moment small corrections prevent massive failures. Under stress, the engine doesn't just survive, it becomes stronger, because the organization stops reacting and starts adapting. Every transformation produces outcomes, but the outcomes don't sit at the edge of the process. They flow back into the system, shaping what happens next. That's the transformation outcomes loop. Every leadership action triggers a system response. The system response shapes how people behave, and those behaviors produce results, positive or negative. When the outcomes are positive, when teams experience early wins, faster alignment, less friction, those outcomes reinforce the entire engine. People lean in, momentum builds, the system becomes more coordinated and predictable. But when outcomes are negative, hesitation, confusion, slow adoption, frustration, rework, those outcomes feed back into the engine as drag. They undermine confidence. They create doubt. They slow execution. They reduce psychological safety. This is why outcomes matter so much. They are not just results, they are signals. Signals of whether the change is gaining power or losing structural integrity. Performance intelligence allows leaders to read the outcomes loop early, not after the quarter ends. Instead of waiting to measure the final result, leaders watch how outcomes begin to shift behavior, capacity, and cultural alignment in real time. When this loop is healthy, the entire transformation becomes self-correcting. When the loop is unhealthy, the engine weakens quietly. Understanding this loop helps leaders do something most organizations never achieve: predict the trajectory of change before the change succeeds or fails. The system wasn't broken, it was blind. This is the story of a company mid-transformation, a company that believed it was doing everything right. The strategy was clear, the roadmap was polished, and the teams, talented, committed, capable. But the results weren't coming. Not in days, not in weeks, not in months. From the outside, everything looked fine. Dashboards were green, deadlines were technically being met, leaders were confident. But inside the system, something else was happening. Something quiet, something slow, something no traditional dashboard could ever see. Execution, the slow fracture beneath the surface. At first glance, execution looked solid. Tasks were checked off, updates sounded positive, progress seemed on track. But the integrated change engine exposed the truth. Micro delays were everywhere. One team finished work 2 days late, every single week. Another hesitated before resolving obstacles. Another quietly redid work because upstream quality slipped. Tiny events, barely noticeable. But like small fractures in a bridge, they add up. No one saw it. Performance intelligence did. Capability, the silent undermining of progress. Then the engine revealed something deeper. The system wasn't enabling the work. The transformation required rapid escalation, but no escalation path existed. Teams needed real-time data, but the analytics team was already drowning. Managers were expected to coach behavior, but had no tools, no model, no training. People weren't failing, capability was failing them, and the engine made that visible. Culture, the unspoken rules that steered the company. Next came culture, not the posters, not the slogans, not the speeches, the real culture, the hidden rules. People hesitated before speaking. Bad news moved quietly, behind closed doors. Speed was praised, even when quality suffered. Middle managers avoided escalation because leadership doesn't like problems. Official values said one thing, hidden rules said another, and behavior always follows the hidden rules. The engine brought this imbalance into the light. PI, the warning signal that saved the transformation. The turning point came from one small, subtle PI signal, a cluster of hesitation data, tiny delays in decision-making across 3 different teams. Nothing dramatic, nothing alarming, but enough to say, the system is starting to crack. Leaders acted early. They fixed escalation paths, cleared contradictory priorities, reduced workflow friction, and most importantly, repaired the hidden cultural narrative that punished transparency. 2 weeks later, micro delays dropped by 37%. 1 quarter later, delivery reliability surged, burnout indicators fell, and culture, for the first time, aligned with the strategy. This wasn't luck, this was visibility. Final reflection. The transformation didn't succeed because people magically changed. It succeeded because leaders finally saw the system clearly. They saw execution drift, capability cracks, cultural resistance, and strain before any of it became failure. The integrated change engine didn't just guide the transformation, it saved it. And once leaders experienced clarity at this level, they never returned to the old way of leading change again. Every transformation leaves clues, and the integrated change engine gives leaders a way to follow those clues back to the truth. When something begins to slip in an organization, our instinct is to fix what we can see. The missed deadline, the conflict between teams, the dip in performance. But symptoms rarely start where they appear. The engine gives you a structured way to diagnose where the system actually began to strain. Step 1 is locating the breakdown. Is the friction appearing in execution, the work itself? Is it capability, the system that should support the work? Is it culture, the norms, behaviors, and hidden rules shaping how people act? Or is it the PI layer, the early signals that tell you drift is forming? Step 2 is tracing the signal backward. A delay in execution might actually be caused by an unclear process. A cultural hesitation might be triggered by mixed messaging from leadership. A capability gap might be showing up as burnout that looks like a performance issue. And step 3 is acting on the right lever instead of the loudest symptom. Because real diagnostic leadership means pausing long enough to ask a better question. What part of the system failed first? When leaders use the engine this way, they stop reacting to noise and start correcting root causes. This is how you prevent spirals. This is how you restore momentum. This is how you steer transformation with precision, not force. Up to this point, we've explored the components of the tri-model: execution, capability, culture, and now performance intelligence. But understanding the pieces isn't enough. Leaders need a way to see how those pieces interact in real time. That's why this tool exists. The tri-model engine diagnostic is not a worksheet. It's not a checklist. It is the system-wide lens that reveals what's really happening beneath the surface of your organization. At the top, performance intelligence sits like the radar system, exposing early signals, drift, friction, and misalignment before they explode into crises. Below that, you see the 3 primary dimensions: execution, what people do; capability, what the system allows them to do; culture, what people feel they can do safely. For the first time, leaders can trace failure or progress to the exact source. Is the team breaking down because execution is weak, or because capability is blocking them, or because the culture is silently resisting the change? PI tells you the truth. Finally, at the bottom, transformation outcomes anchor the entire engine. These outcomes are not guesses. They are the measurable signals that your system is either improving or eroding. This diagnostic gives leaders something they rarely have: an integrated, honest, system-wide view of the truth, while there is still time to fix it. This is the moment where change leadership stops being guesswork and becomes a disciplined, repeatable operating system. This is the moment where everything changes. Not because we added another framework, but because you now have the entire system in your hands. Most organizations treat execution, capability, and culture as separate conversations, disconnected parts that never form a true engine of transformation. But now you can see how they actually work together, how each dimension reinforces the others, and how performance intelligence ties it all into a living diagnostic system. And this changes everything, because transformation finally becomes predictable, not reactive, not emotional, not guesswork. You now have the ability to see drift before it spreads, stress before it breaks teams, misalignment before it derails momentum, and opportunity before it slips away. This is the turning point, because leaders who understand the engine don't fear change, they control it, they guide it, they stabilize it, they make it stick. From this point forward, you are not managing change. You are running the engine that produces it. And in the next episode, we go even deeper. Because now that you have the full system, it's time to master the discipline that keeps it running every single day. We've spent the first 6 episodes building the full change engine, piece by piece. Execution, capability, culture, performance intelligence. Now, it's time to bring it to life. Because a perfect model doesn't matter if leaders can't run it in real time. Change doesn't happen in workshops. It happens on Tuesdays at 10:15 a.m. when a blocker hits. It happens in the hallway after a tough meeting. It happens when a team is tired, the pressure is rising, and everyone quietly looks at the leader. Episode 7 is where theory becomes rhythm, where leadership becomes cadence, where the change engine becomes the way you run your day. In the next episode, you'll learn the operating rhythm behind lasting transformation, how to run alignment meetings that actually work, how to remove barriers before they slow your teams, how to use performance intelligence in daily stand-ups, and how to keep people aligned without micromanaging. This is where great leaders separate themselves, not through big speeches, but through consistent, disciplined action. You've built the system, now it's time to drive it. Episode 7, Leading Change in Real Time. Your operating rhythm begins now.